Good morning. Before we begin our 2020 Remembrance Day ceremony, I have a few announcements. As tomorrow marks the start of our midterm break, we ask you to follow the guidelines outlined by Mr. Sullivan, specifically 3 things. Maintain your strong hygiene and physical distancing principles and practices that you've done so far. Keep your social bubbles small, please. Do not attend any large gatherings. And if over the break you are feeling unwell, please remain home for a few extra days until you're well enough to return. Your teachers will support you during this time off. Each of us has a personal responsibility to all 780 people in our school community. And in advance, I thank you for your support of these guidelines. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge those that organized today's ceremony. Mr. Nunes, Mr. Clausen, Ms. Plow, Mr. Minkler, Ms. Murray, Ms. Emile, and Ms. Widmeyer. I'd also like to thank all of our speakers, performers, and technical team for making this ceremony occur today. Normally, this ceremony would take place on November 11th. However, the way our calendar falls this year, you'll be returning back on that day. Another change is due to the pandemic protocols we're in now. Most of you are not in the Killary Theatre with us today and are instead with your advisor groups. None of these changes, of course, will adjust or impact the somber tone and reverence for those that have come before us. This morning, as you exited Crooks Hall, you would have seen one of our most treasured archival pieces from the old chapel in Brentwood Bay. This honor roll displays every Brentonian that served during World War II, with the center reserved for those that gave the ultimate sacrifice. Later in the service, those names will be read out by our student leaders, Jack, Sloan, and Maher. As tradition dictates, sometime today, perhaps over lunch, I urge you to take a moment to soak in these names and to pin your poppy on the drapery surrounding this honor roll. It is our way of binding you, today's Brentwood students, to those from the past. Like you, they proudly wore that same blazer with the school's crest over their hearts, Dimanu and Manum. One name that you'll see is from the famous 1940-41 First 15 rugby squad, whose remarkable season ended with a points total for 248 for and only 23 against. His name is Ian Gillespie. During that magical season, they lost only one match to Navy. A teammate of Ian's, Colin Linton Graham, immortalized his friend with this poem, A Distant Time. You will see it engraved on a rock just outside of the home change room at the Foot Center, the Gillespie Rock. I love to see that our students have started a new tradition at Brentwood of touching this rock for good luck. The poem reads, in the changing room after the Navy game, he said, Indian, I've joined the Air Force. Through the steam from the showers, he was already a ghost. Live forever, pussycat, I said. I promised you, you'll live forever. We're all immortal when we go to war. You were posted missing in action the next I knew. Your Beaufighter went down on bomber escort over the channel. At Runnymede, I saw your name 20 years later. It seemed the terrible waste of the best fullback the world had ever seen. The citation said you died drawing enemy fire. What else? You called for the mark, solid as houses. You tackled like a rattlesnake. You didn't leave the kitchen when the fire got hot. I promised you you'd live forever. Well, almost. While I live, so do you. The arc of the human experience has historically oscillated between two cycles. One that includes hate, division, and intolerance. And the other, love, trust, and inclusion. With each generation, we try to improve so that we can live in peace in the latter cycle, rather than the uncertainty of the former. Well, for most of us, 2020 will be remembered for the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on our lives. For others, unfortunately, in Afghanistan, Yemen, and Kashmir, 2020 will yield a lifetime of scarred memories of fear, destruction, and war. We live in an era of dangerous polarization. Tribal forces insist that we choose sides. There is no room for middle ground, no room for dialogue, discussion, or decorum. You are either with us or you're against us. We are fortunate then to be part of a school that is proud to have students from over 30 countries, a rainbow coalition of ethnicities, ideas, and perspectives. At Brentwood, we can live, laugh, and cry together. At Brentwood, without fear or favor, we can be our true, authentic selves. It is what generations of old Brentonians would want for you. It is what generations of old Brentonians have sacrificed for you. Con Linton Graham's poem is a reminder of our past and a lesson for our future. As we live, so do they, lest we forget. Please stand for the singing of the Canadian National Anthem.
Good morning. Belligerent. When used as a noun, a belligerent can mean a nation at war. The noteworthy aspect of this noun is that it assigns no blame. It doesn't imply which side was in the wrong. It doesn't imply who started the conflict. It simply provides an understanding of who fought whom. As you may already be learning in your social studies classes, an important component of studying history is to examine multiple perspectives. Recognizing dominant narratives and seeking to find the less prominent ones are important traits of any historian. On Remembrance Day in Canada, our narrative consists of poppies, Vimy Ridge, the beaches of Normandy. There are references to the Holocaust, the Korean War, and more contemporary conflicts such as Afghanistan. And while these are important landmarks in Canadian identity and society, sometimes we also need to broaden our perspective and look beyond the Canadian perspective and experience. Japanese expansion efforts during the 19th and 20th centuries, not dissimilar to other imperial efforts from empires such as the British, Ottoman, or Austro-Hungarian, led to Japanese occupation of territories such as Manchuria, Taiwan, and Korea. The Second Sino-Japanese War, fought against China before and during World War II, was the largest war in Asia during the 20th century. Keep in mind the Korean and Vietnam Wars were also fought during this century. Between 1937 and 1945, it is estimated that 3 million Japanese civilians and military personnel died. Casualties from China, Korea, and the Philippines amounted to approximately 20 million. Meanwhile, back in Canada, 90% of Japanese Canadians living in British Columbia were detained, had their possessions like boats and homes seized, and many never returned to them. Most of them born in Canada and Canadian citizens, these detainees were deemed a security risk to the west coast of Canada. Using Orders in Council and the War Measures Act, the Canadian government forcibly detained Japanese Canadians, including children, to livestock sheds at places like Hastings Park in Vancouver until they were relocated to camps in the interior and Alberta. As we gather today and make our call for peace, I am mindful that war harms everyone involved, no matter who is to blame, which side was in the wrong, and who started the conflict. I now introduce our 3 student speakers, Chris, Yuki, and Tayo.
Since today is Remembrance Day, we will be talking about a simplified description of our ancestors' experience during the war and what we learned about their experience. In World War II, my grandfather was still a little boy. He had to experience a terrible moment, a moment during the recruitment of kamikaze. Kamikaze means God's wind or a divine wind. They went door to door, asking for all the boys in every house. At that time, my grandfather was still little and very sick. When they saw his condition, they let him go, but took 3 of his other brothers and recruited them for kamikaze. At the time, the kids didn't know what was going to happen to them and were encouraged by the name. My great-grandfather and great-grandmother had to let the sons go, not by choice. To this day, I remember how valuable life is and how I have a choice to keep living.
It's been 75 years since World War II ended in 1945. I've never heard a story about what my family did or how they were affected during this time. There's no custom in Japan to tell the history of World War II to each generation. And the stories are not passed down because the people in Japan aren't proud of themselves for their involvement in World War II. For me to find this information was difficult because there isn't a lot of information, and to talk about it is very hard. Most of my information for this story was taught me by my uncle. Since he lives with his parents, my grandparents, on my mother's side, he was able to tell me some details by asking them. This is my great-grandpa. This picture shows his profile, like a resume, and the work he did as a soldier. The information here shows his participation in the Second Sino-Japanese War and the Pacific War, which is World War II. It was mandatory for a man to join the army at the age of 20. This is conscription. While my great-grandpa was in the war, his family were staying in Amino in Kyoto, where they were from, located in the western part of Japan, facing the Sea of Japan. This is the ocean between Japan and Korean Peninsula. Fortunately, at the time, it wasn't as terrible as the other cities, such as Tokyo, Okinawa, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki. He was away at war for 2 years and returned home in 1943 and continued to work for the Department of Nagasaki National Defense and remained at home without returning to the war itself. I learned a lot about my family history in preparing to speak today. I'm honored to know that my great-grandfather fought for my country of Japan. The impact of war on my country is deeply saddening.
As I gaze at cherry blossoms in my garden, from my sickbed I recall the Potomac in spring. My great-great-grandfather, Yukio Ozaki, was in his deathbed in the 1950s when he wrote this poem. Just like the red poppies, cherry blossoms, or sakura trees as we call them, have a cultural significance in Japan, so much so that we have recorded the date of their peak bloom for centuries. Cherry blossoms tend to bloom all at once and then disappear within about a week. So when the sakuras are in full bloom, Japanese people get together with friends and family around the trees to enjoy the beautiful moment before they're gone. During the war, this made cherry blossoms a symbol for the military, as soldiers were told it was an honor to die like the beautiful falling sakura petals. After the war, cherry trees were planted in shrines in Japan to console the souls of soldiers, and eventually came to symbolize peace and friendship. Today, beautiful cherry trees blossom around the world, including the very famous ones planted along the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. The ones that my great-great-grandfather, Yukio Ozaki, as mayor of Tokyo, gifted to the U.S. as a symbol of friendship and gratitude for the U.S. intervention to end the Russo-Japanese War. These cherry trees endured the terrible years, even as World War II divided the two nations. Throughout his life, Yukio Ozaki spoke out for peace, disarmament, and international cooperation. So come spring, when the cherry blossom bloom, it will be a reminder for me to follow his legacy, to promote peace and friendship, for the world to never repeat the tragedy of war.
I am here to introduce our special guest for today's assembly, Nicole Renee Kerr. Sorry. Now I am here to introduce our special guest for today's assembly, Nicole Renee Kerr. Born and raised on Vancouver Island, Nicole joined the Army at 26 years of age and earned the honor of top candidate for both her basic training in Saint Jean, Quebec, and her field artillery training in Fredericton, New Brunswick. After her training, Nicole was posted to the 1st Regiment of the Royal Canadian Horse Artillery in Shiloh, Manitoba, and was deployed to Afghanistan, where she served on Operation Athena, the Canadian Armed Forces' longest-running combat mission, for 8 months. After 6 years of service, Nicole left the military to pursue her dream of becoming an outdoor guide. Today, she works with organizations like Outward Bound Canada, instructing youth leadership and at-risk youth courses, as well as acting as the lead instructor for the Veterans Program. Along with guiding, Nicole runs her own business, teaches yoga, and is working toward a diploma of applied psychology and counseling. Last year, she launched the Adventure and Recovery Program, a retreat-style mountain adventure program that incorporates elements of challenge and outdoor pursuits, along with yoga and meditation, to help inspire people recovering from addiction to live their best life. At the core of who she is Nicole's passion for the outdoors. She is an avid rock climber, enjoys hiking, backpacking, trail running, and is always up for trying something new. It is my honor to introduce to you Nicole Renee Kerr.
Hello. Thank you very much. It is an honor to be here today sharing with you the voices of veterans. Over 40,000 Canadians served in Afghanistan from 2001 to 2014. 158 died in combat, with over 2,000 wounded. IEDs were the #1 cause of fatalities. Reaching out to my veteran friends, I asked them if they would be willing to answer 2 questions as an opportunity to be heard today. For some, just contemplating these questions was hard to do, and they graciously declined. When I grew up, I remember visiting my great-grandpa, who lost a leg in World War II. Eventually, his other leg turned black, and he had to have that one removed as well. This was all I knew of any veteran until I signed up for service in my 20s. It is important to know of our veterans then and now. So here are the voices of veterans today. The 2 questions I asked were, what sacrifices did you make being a soldier? And what would you like people to think about or remember on Remembrance Day? Dietrich, an Army sergeant. I lost time with my friends and family. I lost friends who died as a result of our job. I lost my health, both physical and mental. I would like people to remember on this day that the freedoms they have are a result of the sacrifices of mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, sons and daughters, and that unless you are willing to sacrifice your time from family and friends, unless you are willing to sacrifice your lives for the freedoms we all have today, then please do not speak ill of those who have. Maureen, an Army bombardier. I sacrificed my mental health. I was away from my family for a decade and put them through worry. Others I know sacrificed being away from their spouses and children. There's no way I could be deployed now with a child. For me, I don't really want people to remember war, just to hope and make the change for peace. Sean, an Army sergeant. What people don't understand is that we gave up our everything, all of us. I am forever affected by my experience in Afghanistan. It's heartbreaking that those around us don't seem to care. People have devalued our experience, making it a political agenda. Not a single hero from our war is recognized. I don't like what our country has become. It has forgotten the sacrifice of its soldiers from all generations. In our lifetime, we will see Remembrance Day taken out of our lives because Canada has forgotten. Andrew, an Army bombardier. Trying to answer these questions reminded me of how all over the place I am in my head about the subject. I used to be an adventurer like you, then I took an arrow in the knee. Perfectly describes my situation. Luke, an Army warrant. I don't think I've sacrificed anything. What I did and what I gave willingly, and I did it because I believed in it, and I was lucky enough to be able to do it. I would like people to think about our vets from World War I and World War II, and how the ultimate sacrifice of so many not only liberated nations, but formed our own country and forever cemented us into history as a serious nation, to be respected and to be reckoned with. Almost all of these vets are gone. Let's let them have their day. Stephanie, an Army warrant. Most importantly, my health. I caught a parasite in Afghanistan that has destroyed my bowels and bladder for good. For 10 years, I have suffered daily with so many unpleasant symptoms, and now I'm being medically released because of it, so I'm losing my career as well. I will have to deal with this forever. I've put my career in the forces ahead of any relationship, including those with my family. For 20 years, I have lived far away from any family and friends in order to serve. This wasn't easy at times, especially being single and going through stuff like my illness. I would like people to reflect on the fact that soldiers sacrifice a lot, including the ultimate price, for their country. Soldiers live tough lives and do things most people could never do. That there are good people in this world who are willing to sacrifice themselves and their lives in order to protect others. Give them the respect they deserve. Brody, an Army officer. I was introduced to the concept of unlimited liability when I joined. In Chapter 2, Fundamental Beliefs and Expectations of the Canadian Forces Manual, titled Duty with Honor, it talks about a soldier's willingness to commit and submit to this concept. Unlimited liability means that all members accept and understand that they are subject to being lawfully ordered into harm's way under conditions that could lead to the loss of their lives. Beyond this, my biggest sacrifice was being away from family and friends, and for very long periods of time, which was very difficult emotionally. I would like people to think about those who sacrificed their lives and the courage of those who have served in the Canadian Armed Forces. I want people to think about their freedoms on Remembrance Day. All of the freedoms we hold dear here in Canada, whether that be freedom of expression, opinion, beliefs, religion, freedom of thought, peaceful assembly, or freedom of association, are all protected because of those who fought and died for us. I want people to think about those family members in their own family or friends of their family who have served and what that person means to them. Aaron, an Army bombardier. The biggest sacrifice I made was my mental health, and I only realized that in the last few years. I joined when I was 19, and I was forced into a never show weakness mentality. I believed the only reasonable or real emotions were happy and angry. I struggle almost daily, learning that it's okay to be sad and it's normal. I sacrificed my friends and my family also, going months without seeing or even talking to sometimes. I think people need to remember that freedom isn't free. A lot of people have sacrificed a lot more than people think. Anton, an Air Force private. I sacrificed my mental health. We are so lucky to live in a country with limitless opportunities to pursue, all without fear of repercussions. Chris, a Navy's leading seaman. I think the biggest sacrifice I had to make was time away from my family. Lots of missed birthdays, holidays, and times that I really wish I could have been there for, but duty called. I was fortunate to have a family that was very understanding, though, and we always made up for it when I got back. I hope people will remember the ultimate sacrifices that our soldiers had to make in order for us to live such a wonderful life here in Canada. Victoria, an Army sergeant. I sacrificed nothing compared to what was received. Being a soldier and being deployed only added value to my life, and I am forever grateful. All the learning, challenges, experiences, and trauma led to growth. It led to healthy coping mechanisms that can be applied to life after the military. It led to an outlook that appreciates the little moments and the big, as well as an emotional awareness and a gratitude for connection. If we could sit and discuss the high level of adaptability, resilience, and connection required of soldiers during the toughest times, and how we can learn from those insights to help us through life today, it is my personal belief that the best way we can honor our brothers and sisters who died overseas is to live our best life. And I mean wholeheartedly put our best foot forward every day to connect and heal, to be kind, to listen, to lift others up. Continually strive to be good humans and to take in experiences with a grateful heart. It is our duty to do our best to live the life they never had a chance to fulfill. Brent, an Army officer. I have committed and given my time to service. I went to Bosnia for 7 months and Afghanistan for 7 months. Both tours also included 7 months of training prior to deployment. During COVID-19, I deployed with Canadian Armed Forces for 6 months. In all of this, I assume unlimited liability. I hope people remember the lives of the Canadian soldiers that were lost while supporting the positive future of the world. I think that's the most important. Mark, an Army corporal. I made many sacrifices as a soldier. I left my home, family, and friends to travel across the country for training. I trained at my unit as an infantry soldier 4 provinces away from home. There was no overtime. I sometimes worked such long hours that I would hallucinate. There would be days without food and water. This was my indoctrination to war. Hate and anger became habitual. It was a necessary life skill needed to survive for a soldier trained to kill at 18 years old. At 19, I sat with my mother and organized my funeral and burial. I kissed and hugged her and left to help in a war that wasn't mine, wearing a blue beret and driving white tanks. I was given all my implements of war and told that to kill anyone meant jail back home. Never being able to test my skills, I returned home to a country that didn't understand my sacrifice. My country treated me like a stray, angry dog. No one took the time to stop, listen, care, and understand, but they easily judged and avoided me. I again left my home, my support, my friends and family to rejoin the military family I left so many years ago as the stray, angry dog. What people need to remember on Remembrance Day is that the average veteran is 45 years old. The person beside you at the grocery store may be that very same person who saw 5 friends blown up in Afghanistan. Seek them out, ask them questions, and give them a hug. You owe them that. Jim, an Army sergeant. I think the biggest sacrifice we gave was the part of ourselves we had to leave in Afghanistan. Even the people who made it home after an event lost a bit of empathy for the world. What I always remember on the 11th is the families of the fallen, because I think of the fallen every day. This is me, Nicole, an Army bombardier. I sacrificed my freedom to give the freedom to others. I sacrificed the creative parts of me, the part of me that was allowed to have emotions and free thought. I sacrificed my physical and mental health. I missed birthdays and watching my nieces and nephews grow. But these sacrifices also came with opportunities to grow and learn and experience strength in adversity. I hope people will always take a moment of silence on November 11th, no matter where you are, and remember those that paid the ultimate sacrifice of their life for duty. Honor them. Honor your veterans that still suffer in silence. Find ways to support them. Support each other. Cultivate gratitude for the life you have today, and remember why you have the freedoms that you do. Work hard at the things you value, work together, use your voice, exercise your rights, and mostly live in gratitude. You have much to be thankful for. Thank you so much for listening to the voices of veterans. We remember.
Today, at the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, people gather at war memorials to stand with their heads bowed. In 2 minutes of silence, they will pay tribute to the millions that were killed in war this century.
Each will remember in his or her own way. Perhaps veterans will think of comrades as they were a few seconds before their death. Wives will remember the endless vigil for husbands who never returned. Parents will think of their children who were so young and alive when they left home for the last time. We, who are today so young and alive, will contemplate the horror of war and cherish the blessing of peace.
In the cemeteries of Europe, a simple maple leaf inscribed on over 100,000 gravestones tells passers-by that Canadians killed in war lie buried there. An awful price in human lives was paid by the youth of past generations to achieve peace. By the act of remembering today, we ensure that their sacrifices are not forgotten.
Some who died came from Brentwood. In the old Brentwood chapel, built by a past generation of Brentonians, etched in oak on the memorial are the names of the Brentwood fallen. Let us pay homage to the courage of those Brentonians who sacrificed their lives for their country. Please stand for the reading of the Brentwood College Roll of Honor, the last post, the silent tribute, and the reveille. Old boys of Brentwood College who lost their lives during the World War of 1939 to 1945.
Alec Beliche, Dacre Barrett Leonard, Norman Beard,
John Bishop, John Bryden, John Campbell.
Arthur Coulter, Alan Dunlop, Robert Field,
Ian Gillespie, John Gillespie, Bruce Hanbury,
Barnett Harvey, Sholto Marlatt, Alan Mayhew,
Ken Osler, Richard Proctor, Robert Proctor,
Leigh Salter, Ralph Smith, John Stubbs,
Donald Stewart, Glenn Svensson, Michael Simons.
Thornton White, Lawrence Wilkinson, Ted Williams.
Remembrance Day is not a glorification of war. It is a call for peace. It asks each one of us, what have we done to make peace? Remembrance Day is the time for each of us to think about what we've contributed to the future. Remembrance Day calls out that there should be no more names chiseled on gravestones of war anywhere in the world. The torch is being passed on, de manu in manum, from hand in hand, to you, the next generation. Let us all take a few minutes today to look into our hearts and dream the dream of peace. In the dining hall is the roll of honor of the Brentonian fallen. It was housed in the old chapel built by the past generation of Brentonians. Please place your poppy on the memorial later today.
Lest we forget, thank you for attending today's ceremony.